Thank you very much, Speaker. We're very disappointed that the forecasted deficit of $8.5 billion actually grew by $1 billion. The actual deficit is now $9.5 billion. While the government presents a rosier number, I'm going to expose how they got to that number. I'll read from their own document, page 100. The province's total revenue projection for 2015-16 of $125.6 billion is $1.2 billion higher than the budget forecast of 2015. That's accurate. The increase largely reflects the government's progress on its asset optimization strategy related to the recent Hydro One initial public offering. Right. So, of course, Speaker, what that means is they have used the sale of Hydro One and put that number in the revenue, the exact thing we've said they would be doing all along. Further to that, Speaker, if we look at page 99 of the budget, we know that they used $1 billion from a reserve. So, Speaker, the number, this rosy number that they have projected, is not accurate whatsoever. When you add back the reserve number of $1 billion and this juiced-up number because of the $1.2 billion that they've included from the sale of hydro, that brings this annual deficit this year to $9.5 billion, Speaker, $2 billion higher than the number they just presented to this very legislature. We've been saying this all along, Speaker. That hydro sale money is not for transit. It's always been designed to lower their deficit, just as they did today. Speaker, this brings us back to what the Financial Accountability Officer said. Just last week, the week before, he told us the government's revenue is going to be lower than they said, and it was, and they won't meet their spending reductions, and they didn't. The FAO, the only person that we can actually listen to in addition to the Auditor General and the OPP, was absolutely correct. We presented documents, Speaker, some 18 months ago from the Ministry of Finance's own files that showed us a $4 billion gap in their deficit reduction plan. And that, of course, was confirmed by the Financial Accountability Officer report earlier this month. He gave us the real numbers, Speaker. We'll go with his numbers any day of the week. He said the budget won't be balanced in 2017-18. Rather, we'll still have a deficit of between $3.5 billion and $7.2 billion. Speaker, he told us that they will not meet their revenue numbers and they will not control their spending, and this is the result, and we saw that flat out today. We saw that the only way they can have a lower number was by selling assets, booking that in revenue, and, Speaker, taking $1 billion out of reserves. Now, we have always said that, Speaker, in this legislature since day one. We've always stated that this government was not selling money to put towards transit. Rather, the money was always designed to fluff up the deficit numbers. And if you recall, Speaker, in their very own 2014 budget, they had $130 billion was listed for transit and infrastructure expenditures. It did not need the sale of hydro. If you look closely at it, Speaker, you'll see that they had $3.1 billion of asset sales. $1.1 billion in year one came from the sale of GM shares. You have $1 billion in the next year, $500 million the year after, and $500 million the year after, Speaker. There was no mention, there was no numbers that related whatsoever to the sale of hydro. That sale of hydro was not necessary to reach the $130 billion. Of course, in the 2015 budget, the exact same $130 billion was announced, but all of a sudden, they needed the hydro money. I think the Ottawa Citizen said it best. Way back in April, they pegged this. They figured it out as we did way back in April. Quote, "A reasonable person might wonder why we need to sell most of a significant public asset just to keep doing what we've been doing for years. The real answer is that putting some billions of new money into the province's transit trust will enable the government to quietly shift existing money to help it reduce the deficit."
Thank you. Further response?